Welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. On top of mind for everyone, how safe are our schools in the wake of what happened in Parkland, Florida? To talk about that is Patrick Kissane, who is a Fort Lee Police Deputy Chief, member of the School Safety Task Force in 2015, and the founder of the Association of School Resource Officers. You seem to be the perfect person to talk to right now. Let's talk about school officers for a second. We have word now that a deputy in Parkland outside the high school either froze or he claims he was trained that way, but he didn't go in for minutes as there were students being shot. First off, did he do the right thing? No, he didn't do the right thing. Is it possible that he just froze?
Yes. So in highly stressful events, it wouldn't be unrealistic for somebody to have a physiological response to the stressor, including freezing. And that is surely a possibility, as horrible as it is for this particular incident.
But this guy, Scott Peterson, now I know he feels responsible for some of these deaths now. His life is ruined for one moment's decision.
Well, you could argue that his responsibility was to respond to the shooter, and he didn't meet his responsibility, regardless of what the cause was. Because as we know, when it comes to school shootings, that almost all school shootings, at least according to the FBI study, are over in less than 5 minutes. So he lost a critical amount of time to have a response that might have had an impact on saving lives. And what's kind of sad about it too is that here we have an officer who has a weapon, who has a bulletproof vest on, I'm assuming, and yet we have teachers and coaches and students that took heroic action who arguably didn't freeze.
Right, and he must have heard the gunshots, he must have heard people screaming, he must have heard the chaos, and he stayed outside. I don't want to stay on him too much, but in early March, I believe it's March 14th, there is a planned walkout at schools across the country, and they gave the time of it. And so students are going to be walking out for 17 minutes in honor of the 17 killed in Parkland. This is put on by the same organizers of the Women's March. Good idea or bad idea?
Well, I think it's a good idea that we teach children to exercise their freedom of speech and right to assemble. However, I don't believe it's a good idea to do it and disrupt the school environment during the day, because it's ironic that here we are trying to secure schools and keep children in schools, which should be a safe environment, keep it locked down, and yet we're expecting them to unload from the school, and we're advertising it and possibly giving others who we don't know what their intents are an opportunity to maybe seize upon this.
They've arrested 2 potential school shooters, one in upstate New York, one in California, that had a cache of weapons, and people said they had threatened schools. So there's people out there with those sick minds that have evil intent. You broadcast that on a certain date at a certain time, all the students are going to be outside. That seems like a recipe for disaster.
Sure, it doesn't seem like a responsible action to take. It certainly doesn't. It creates some challenges for the schools, for law enforcement. It is a very challenging situation, and I feel that if they're going to protest, or if they're going to have an assembly, to do it in a way that's safer for them, and maybe they can organize it a little better than just walking in. I don't believe a lot of schools are prepared to lose their entire student population and dump them into the sidewalks in front of the school, that maybe the sidewalks even aren't big enough for all these kids coming out at one time.
So if you were a superintendent at a school, you would want to organize a safer protest somewhere else, somewhere that was controlled?
Yes, I would. I would definitely have, because students, and the difference, I think, between this shooting and other shootings are that I think that the students themselves, which should be part of this solution, are angry, and they have a right to be. However, I believe as adults that we need to channel that anger for them and help them do something that in a more responsible or a safer way anyway. So I think while superintendents should respect the rights of students to protest, I think that they should help guide them to do it in a safe manner.
Let's talk about New Jersey schools, because on top of mind of every parent when they hear about any school shooting, but now recently in Parkland, is, are my schools safe? Now, from what I've heard, if New Jersey is not the pinnacle when it comes to school safety, it's pretty close to the top. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree. I would argue strongly that our state has taken steps over the last decade to make our schools safer by passing numerous pieces of legislation that create a safer environment, including mandatory lockdowns. We have bullying prevention programs now, HIP policies to address kids that are either bullied or are doing the bullying, which there's studies that relate to all other types of behavior, a result of being a victim or bullied themselves. We have laws now that allow for retired police officers to come back and work for the police chief and actually get assigned to schools as a school resource officer, a community policing-based model. There's some other suggestions that I think in our school security task force report that some schools have enacted, but I don't know that all our schools. And as our Attorney General mentioned this week, there's a lot of very good recommendations that they could still follow up on, such as creating these behavioral threat assessment teams within schools for targeted violence, and maybe addressing the problem early, like we saw in Parkland, was an issue that, you know, I don't believe that problem should have been solved after the gun was at the building.
Exactly, and that's why I want to key in on that for a second.
We had all this time before.
Does law enforcement have a problem when it comes to dealing with people with mental health problems who are dangerous? Because the Supreme Court has said that if somebody is mentally ill and is a danger to themselves or others, they can be involuntarily committed if there is preponderance or evidence that they are a danger. And yet it doesn't seem like law enforcement is willing to take that step in most cases. Is there a problem? No.
I believe that I've been in this law enforcement for almost 28 years, and I could tell you that weekly, if not monthly, that we absolutely take people into protective custody that could be harm to themselves or others, including children, and bring them to get the mental health they need. And it's actually not a crime to be in crisis, but it's a responsibility on law enforcement to take custody of the person if we feel that they have the potential of having a danger to themselves or others. So very common police action. I just don't think we don't advertise it. It doesn't go on the news that, hey, we took a 14-year-old juvenile to the hospital today because they wanted to kill themselves.
But you may have saved lives by doing
that. Absolutely. There's multiple cases of that where law enforcement every day are dealing with mental health challenges, as well as our schools. There's a lot of children in crisis. So when we teach cops in schools, that's probably the #1 topic that we discuss with them, that, believe it or not, yes, there could be weapons, there could be gangs, there could be drugs. However, a lot of your time is going to be fulfilled with dealing with children who are in crisis, whether it's cutting or suicide or bullying or victims of crime. So a lot of times police officers work with students and their staff, and I would argue that the staff spends a considerable amount of time with their counseling staff to help these children who are in crisis. I would argue that's probably one of the #1 issues that schools do deal with. There's just a lot of children in crisis nowadays. Well,
this kid, Nicholas Cruz, seemed to be crying out for help, and nobody was there for him. I really appreciate you coming in today.
So the one thing I'd like to say to you, Larry, is, and we put a lot of focus on telling people, if you see something, say something. I think there's a third part of that maybe we need to focus more on, once somebody says something, they see something, they say something, we need to do something.
Well said.
Thank you.
Patrick Kissane is the Fort Lee Police Deputy Chief. He was a member of the 2015 School Safety Task Force and the founder of the Association of School Resource Officers. We're going to stay with this topic when we come back and talk to someone from the Howe Police Department when Jersey Matters continues.